Hey everyone, welcome to Around the Farm, the podcast about all things ag. I'm your host, Clint Schaffer, and today we're going to be talking to our guests, Phil and Jeff, about planting in 2021 and the benefits that they see from seed scripting. So stay tuned. Phil, Jeff, thanks for joining us here today.
Yeah, no problem.
Well, Phil, how about I start with you first? How about you tell the listeners, where you're from, your career in ag, and kind of what you're up to.
Well, I started in agriculture actually in high school. Worked on a farm and then farmed with a guy for about 17 years in south central Nebraska, around Minden, Nebraska. Then in 1992, I got into the retail business. And the fall of 1993, I moved out to eastern Iowa. Worked at a couple different places before I started at Cedar County Co-op, where I am now. Been here 16, going on 17 years, selling fertilizer, chemicals, and seed, and currently managing the seed department at Cedar County Co-op.
Nice. Well, thanks again for joining the show here. So, Jeff, how about yourself? I'll kick it over to you. What's your story?
Well, I graduated high school in 1978 and went to 2 years of community college in an ag management 20 miles south of home. Ended up staying at home. Rented a neighbor's farm the year I graduated high school, small 50 acres. And the next year, Dad and I formed a partnership. Operated that with him until 2013 when he retired at the age of 75. My wife farms with me now. She's a retired school teacher, took early retirement, and we farm about 1,800 or so acres. We run a herd of stock cows, about 100, 120 cows, and we own part of a farrowing unit, and we feed about 8,000 pigs out of there a year.
Oh. Raising cattle, so you're just absolutely loving how brutal this winter is then, right?
Yeah, it's you find out what you're made of, I think.
Yeah. Hopefully calving season hasn't started yet. At least hold off for another few weeks.
That's right. Yeah, about the end of March.
There we go. Well, hey, Phil, I'm going to start with you here. I know that it's we're sitting here in wintertime, but planting season is going to be catching up to us here quickly. And I wanted to talk to you about just planting scripts. I know you've worked on a lot of those on the past. How do you really work with your farmers when it comes to planting prescriptions?
Well, it really starts in the fall. After harvest gets going, you start thinking about selling seed. The first thing you got to do is pick out a hybrid that's going to work across the field, before you even really start thinking about the population. And then you need to start looking at past yield data, because our yield data from past years is what we use or is what the program uses to help, determine populations and that. So, like I say, picking a hybrid, one that the grower, is going to feel comfortable with in that field. And then just figuring out which years of data and stuff you're going to use. And then come, about this time of year, then we'll start, running the prescriptions and going over them and, get comfortable with what our plan is. So it's really, kind of a drawn out process over a few months, but.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Jeff, from your point of view, as Phil talks about, this conversation gets started in the fall. A lot of these decisions have to be made while you're sitting in the cab of the combine, right?
Yeah, we do an awful lot of evaluating of what worked good this year. And when you take a year like 2020, though, you have to, or any year that it's really extreme, you don't know if you really, maybe you had, for instance, we had an awful lot of wind with the derecho, and there were some hybrids that in parts of the field where they didn't blow down yielded tremendously well, and then, they didn't take the wind real well. So you have to ask yourself, how much stock do you put in this year's results? But yeah, over like Phil said, you look at multiple years worth of results to decide where you're going to place what hybrid, I guess. And but yeah, we think about this a long time.
Yeah, that's absolutely. How long have you been running planting prescriptions on your operation?
Oh, I'm not even sure how long, Phil.
We've been doing them at least 4 years,
4 or 5 years.
I think. Yeah.
Have the tools or decision making changed over the course of that time?
Yeah, I mean, now we're using the Climate FieldView auto scripting is what we're using, and so once you determine what hybrid you're using, I mean, it's real easy. You go in there and you tell the program what hybrid it is, and it's gonna, and you tell it which years of data you want to use, because if you get some skewed data from a year, you want to throw that data out, and we've done that several times. But once you have that data and you pick out the ones, I mean, it automatically picks out the zones, creates its own zones, according to the hybrid. If you take 2 different hybrids in the same field, it's going to make a different prescription for each hybrid because it knows the nuances of each hybrid. And once you get that population and go over it with like Jeff and we both agree on it, then it's just a matter of clicking a couple buttons. It goes to the cloud, back down to his iPad and then to his controller. So it's the digital tools here have made it pretty easy compared to some of the things you had to do the way you did it before. But
yeah, I cut my teeth on making prescriptions years ago, and this was back when you were manually drawing in whether it was yield zone or doing yield zones or soil types, and man, that was just one time-consuming process back then.
Correct. Yeah, we don't have to do near as much of that. The program's doing all that for us now, and it knows the hybrid, and it can and it's knowing the soils. It sees that stuff in the background. And we're not having to do that work like you did, and makes it a lot easier, a lot faster, and probably more accurate. But
Jeff, I mean, when you look at digital tools just as a whole, not necessarily just a scripting piece, how's a lot of these new tools really played a role in your operation?
Well, it gives us the opportunity to manage things not by the field. Maybe by the foot, by the square foot, maybe by the seed. We let's just put the right population where it'll do the best in the field. We don't have a lot of variability in our soils, but we do have a spot here or there with a little sand on the side hill, and you can't push population there; it'll fall on its face. So between that and the ability to do variable nitrogen recommendations, for instance, I think we're being a lot better stewards of our inputs and the environment. I guess that's the way I boil it down.
Have you seen your planting rates really change over the course of time, as you've been using these scripts?
I don't think we're doing much different. I think we're just reallocating it to the part of the field.
Yeah, I don't think total populations have changed that much. It's just you have a range through the field. It's the same thing we do on fertilizer. We're using about the same amount of product, but it's getting put where it needs to be.
When I look at the map, pull up the data at the end after field's planted and see the average, it'll give you the average per acre, and we're in that 35 to 36,000 range on a lot of them, and to me that's just about right.
Yep. Yeah, Dad and I have had a lot of those conversations, and you talked about it. We have a lot of sand knolls and corners in fields, and man, a lot of times we're pushing populations down to 15,000 plants per acre down on that sand, and putting a little bit more on some of the heavier good dirt. So, no, I understand that whole reallocation process there. So, Phil, when you're recommending some of these tools to your farmers, how do you talk to a guy to just kind of get them into that whole process?
Well, like I said, we use the Climate FieldView, but I tell a guy that if you're going to use any of these digital tools, first thing you want to do is use one that's user friendly. You don't. And then if you can get one that'll carry you all the way through planting, all the way through harvest, So, which also makes it easier, because if you go out there and you find one that's hard to use and is confusing and you don't quite understand, you're going to just quit using it before you ever get a chance to see what it does for you. So that's the number one thing is, and I think Jeff will attest to you on the Climate FieldView, the user friendliness of that program is what makes people keep using it. So,
Jeff, are you primarily using it on iPad, on your phone, or a little mix of both?
Yeah, I've got a laptop that's on too, the desktop version. We carry it in our phones. We carry 2 iPads in the tractors anyway, because that runs our RTK signal comes through there. So it's a neat fit that all can pile onto the iPad. We don't have room in the cab for one more thing, I don't think. I would say that the FieldView with the precision planning, the way that fit together, you can do a whole lot with a couple things, you know. There's an awful lot of stuff running through that. It's amazing to me. I never would have anticipated 43 years ago when I started this, we'd be doing anything remotely close to this. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's amazing the amount of power they pack into a small little machine there. But man, they're one of the most important tools that we're seeing in farming at this point in time. So for data wise, as far as so Jeff, you made the decision to jump into scripting a few years back. A lot of farmers are asking, hey, how's that impact my bottom line? Is it worth doing? How did you come to that decision that you were ready to jump into variable rate?
Well, I'll give you an example. It was probably after we'd been doing it for a while, but it's an illustration that stuck in my head. But in 2018, and I know it was Climate, or I guess it might have been Asgrow, that wanted to do a variable, not a variable, but a population study on soybeans. Mm-hmm. And at that time, we were planting our beans in 30-inch rows. And I was hearing from Iowa State and other people, you can pull those populations back. So we ran a 75-acre field, and Phil had it set up so that we ran anywhere from 120 to 180,000. And when we got done with it and compared it, it was gratifying to see that as we pulled down closer to that 120, 130 range, we really weren't hurting yield at all.
I know, talking to a lot of guys, population, lower in population, and then early planting dates. So have you dabbled into that at all?
Yeah, that field was the first year that we planted soybeans in April, and we had pretty good result, didn't we, Phil?
Yeah, I think the field averaged 97 bushels that year, I believe it was.
We got a trip to Orlando over that deal. Our 10-acre plot averaged 107 in 2018. We were.
Wow, that is awesome.
That sold us on early planting beans. Yeah.
Are you primarily early planting beans at this point now?
Trying to be. 2019, it was hard to get anything in early, but.
Right.
And our goal is to start the soybean planter, and that way you're doing something, and then 2 or 3 days when the soil's fit, then you start planting corn.
There you go. Well, Jeff, I also know that understand that you and your wife do a lot for young farmers as well. Can you just tell the listeners just some of the activities that y'all do?
Well, I guess one young farmer in particular. We've got a neighbor. He's not a boy anymore. He's 30 years old, but he grew up in our neighborhood and known the family all my life, and just a great young man, a hard worker. Wanted a chance to farm. His family farm didn't get passed to the next generation like they had kind of hoped. Non-farming relatives wanted their money, so the farm got sold. So long story short, he was working at a John Deere dealership. My dad was retiring. I needed help. He wanted an opportunity. And he asked me who I was going to hire. And I said, I haven't thought about it yet, but are you interested? Yeah. I said, well, I don't know if I can compete with John Deere. And he said, well, I don't have to earn that much money. I want to know that I've got an opportunity to farm someday. So he worked for us for 5 years. And then in 2020, we started a new partnership my wife and I did with him called Rose Valley Farm. And he's buying his way into that, and it's been a real good relationship, and so that's basically what we're trying to do. It's beneficial to both of us. I have 2 daughters and a son, and none of them are. My son's in the Air Force. He didn't want to farm, so it was either find somebody young with some energy, or I'd be looking for something a little easier than farming to do, I think, for the rest of my career.
Well, two things on that. First off, please thank your son for serving and all the service that he does there as well. So I appreciate that. And second off, that is fantastic. I think to give the next generation an opportunity to farm. I think that is fantastic. So hats off to you and your wife for really taking the lead on that, and hopefully that kind of starts cascading across the country. So.
Mm-hmm.
So one other thing I was going to ask, as we start thinking about just all this, a lot of advice and different practices, can you share, both of you, share with the listeners the best piece of advice that you've received when it comes to farming?
Well, I'll go first on that. I think the most important thing is the person should set goals each year. I've been told that you'll set a goal, whether it be your yield goal or your pricing goal or, whatever it is, and then be happy when you reach that goal. If you reach that goal in a year, maybe it could have been better. But the following years, you can set the goal higher then. But to always set a goal and try to reach that, it's going to make you perform better, I think. So, yeah. Kind of goes with anything, not just farming.
How about you, Jeff?
Oh, my dad always used to say you have to walk before you can run. And that's I would say, a little bit opposite of what we do with technology. We've been willing to grab a hold of some of that before we really understood it. But that's the walk before you can run. Make sure you can handle what you've got before you bite any more off, I guess. My advice that I give other people, not that anybody asks for it, is don't be afraid to reach out to somebody else for help. And I'm talking about, we just harvested my 43rd crop. I've learned more in the last 6 or 7 years, with all the technology that's out there. I'm learning new things all the time, and it's above my pay grade a lot of times. But I'm very comfortable with Phil knowing the ins and outs of the climate platform without a doubt. And then we also collaborate with some, an outside agronomist that works well with Phil. But he's got some ideas that we've tried that have made a tremendous difference with, the other things we invest in, the equipment, the technology. And I feel like our crop yields have been awful good. We've got a pretty good 5-year average. You take out 19 and 20. The 5 years before that were awful good. I was real proud of what we were doing. So, I guess I would say there's a lot of things you can't handle on your own. Don't be afraid to find somebody else that can specialize in that. They cost money, but I found that most of them pay their way.
I think that is a fantastic piece of advice from both of you. So I do appreciate that, and it's always good to get a lot of that knowledge and expertise from folks, and I know a lot of people are asking those same questions. So thank you both for that. One last question: is the little locally run theater in Tipton still showing movies?
No, it's not showing movies anymore, but they're trying to restore the theater. I'm not sure what all they're wanting to do with it, but there's a big fund drive to kind of refurbish the whole building. And
that is great.
You know more what their total plan is.
That sounds about right.
The gal in the office here is on the committee. I could ask her. But yeah, there hasn't been movies for a few years.
Gotcha. Well, I know last time I drove by, I just think that's one of the neatest little parts of downtown there. So I just thought I'd ask. So, all right. Well, Phil, Jeff, thanks a lot for joining the podcast here. It's been an absolute pleasure having this conversation, and good luck in the 2021 planting season.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If we can get rid of some snow, we'll be right out there. Yeah.
Yeah, no kidding. All right. Take care.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Yep.
Hey, I just want to give a special thanks to Phil and Jeff for joining us on the podcast today. I'm still in awe about the soybean yield. That is absolutely amazing. And hey, with that, I want to say, if you like the video today, be sure to like the video and subscribe and ring the bell to get notified each and every time that we post up new content. And also, we're available wherever you listen to podcasts, also on YouTube. So with that, we'll see you around the farm.